So there are a number of estimates made in 2016 of the total value of the trade in counterfeit items across a range of different industry areas, and this is considering both online and offline activity together. And they found that the largest counterfeit markets were the trade in pharmaceuticals, which is worth something like $200 billion, electronics, which is $169 billion, and food, something like $49 billion. The total market associated with counterfeit activity is something like $2 trillion. Just looking at the EU alone, there was an estimate that about 48 billion euros, so something like 7% of all sales are lost per year due to the presence of counterfeits in the market. And obviously, from a point of online brand protection, a significant part of this trade takes place online. Something like 1 in 6 products bought online is counterfeit. And obviously this causes damage to the economy, to job markets and to brands themselves, both due to lost revenue and due to reputational issues due to the fact that a number of these counterfeits are poor quality and can be dangerous. And that's really a key point. Counterfeit goods, which are not really subject to the same standards as legitimate items, can have significant safety implications. So things like pharmaceuticals, food products, machinery parts, so think cars, aircraft, that sort of thing. It was estimated in 2013 that there were over 1 million deaths per year which were caused just by counterfeit pharmaceuticals. When it comes to identifying counterfeiting, the first stage is really the identification of the e-commerce activity itself. So that's the environments where items are being sold online. And there's a number of these. So there might be marketplaces. So these are sites where there are offers of sale by a range of different organisations or individuals. And there may be standalone websites. So that's generally carried out via a process of e-commerce discovery. So using keywords, search engines to try and find sites that maybe we didn't know about at the outset of monitoring. In addition, e-commerce can take place in other environments, so things like via social media, mobile apps and so on. So then, having identified the e-commerce activity, it's then generally of interest to try and work out what part of that is actually selling counterfeits. And it's important to point out that the automated identification of counterfeits is generally not possible. What we can usually do is prioritise based on things like price point, the quantity by which goods are being sold and so on. It generally requires a case of manual inspection of the listings themselves to find things like counterfeit identifiers. So that might be looking for goods maybe being produced in a particular colour which the legitimate manufacturer never produced. Of course, even that is quite difficult. So just looking at the product images, you can look at something in an image and it might look like it's legitimate or not legitimate, but of course you've got no guarantee that what you actually buy through that website is what appears in those images. So generally it requires something like a test purchase to make a definitive identification that an item being sold might be a counterfeit. So the process of enforcement, so that's the takedown or the removal of counterfeits that have been identified. Generally the approaches that are available are the same as for general web content. So they might be notifications being sent to the host or registrar of a website, or for marketplaces generally it's via some sort of IP protection program, usually by email or web form. And generally that requires the brand owner or their representative to submit things like proof of IP rights, documentation relating to that brand owner, and proof that the items identified are infringing or counterfeit in some way. It might also be appropriate to try and disrupt the supply chain for the counterfeits more generally, so getting rid of the raw materials. That can be, for example, for pharmaceuticals, that could be targeting people distributing the active ingredients, and maybe carrying out things like online investigations to give information on locations that might be appropriate for on-the-ground raids. Brand owners can also take into account other techniques, so using things like security labelling or putting in product elements, those things like holograms, which may be difficult to reproduce. And they may also want to consider working with service providers who provide the ability for the legitimate sellers to sort of validate themselves. So for example, showing codes in the product images which can be checked against an official database.